With the removal of the Bleed Elder mod on weapons coming in Ultimatum 3.14, who would ever play a Bleed build again? You would. Welcome, it's your friendly neighborhood Badger here, and I'm back for my first of 3 Ultimatum League starters. Bladestorm received a viability buff to its Bloodstance version of the skill, giving it a more multiplier of over 100% to bleeds applied. This catapulted it into the realm of other viable bleed options, and with the underrated Jack the Axe unique item, this skill performs as a very strong and cheap starter to get you grinding that Atlas. Coupled with the new Corrupting Fever skill, you'll be shredding enemies left and right, while pretending Explodey Chest didn't get nerfed with the bleed explosions from Gladiator. Keep in mind, all the gameplay shown here is on the 3.13 patch, with very scuffed gear from 30 minutes of searching my tabs in Standard, so the damage you are seeing here is much less than half of what it will be on a low to medium investment. Now, remember it's extremely easy to scale max block and spell block on a Gladiator, and that's why you're not seeing Omega Lull type DPS coming out of this build. It is mainly because it is more focused on defense than offense, but it is very respectable in the endgame. So if you're looking for a very tanky and smooth starter, look no further. The damage can be scaled up to very respectable levels through stacking Elder Bleed mods on items, and Awakened Gems skyrocket this build even further, so you can stick on this character for all the content in the game. As always, the handy color bar below should help you navigate between the sections. Well, that's about it for the intro. Let's get into it. Alright, it is time to get into the nitty-gritty of this build guide. Now, I've just got a couple of things to say before we get into the budget gear and then the budget links of this build itself. And the first thing that I'm going to say is because not everything is updated on the community fork of Path of Building yet, as the release of this build guide, I am kind of doing a little bit of Path of Building hacking with some extra text just to emulate the buffs that are coming to Bladestorm. So you can see here on Jack the Axe at the top here, we've got at the bottom there for new Bladestorm 108% more damage with bleeding. Same thing with the semi-budget Royal Axe and then the endgame Axe there as well. They all have the same kind of emulation there as well. So we're going to stick with Jack the Axe right there. Now that's pretty much it that is changing. Once the new Path of Building update does come out, I am going to be updating on the build guide itself. I'm going to be updating those Path of Buildings. So don't be too worried about that. It should all update very quickly. But you'll be seeing pretty much the same kind of DPS right here. Now you can see on the budget version, we're hitting just around about 1 million bleed DPS, which is pretty nice. And the duration of the bleeds themselves, if we actually just go to the budget Bladestorm here, they're just under 5 seconds right here as well, which is pretty nice. It's pretty tasty. Now, I do find that this is relatively cheap right here. The only thing that's potentially going to cost money, especially at day 1, day 2, is going to be your Jack the Axe. Now, I do have a budget version of an axe. If you just get like a nice fizz-crafted axe, any sort of fizz-crafted axe, it's going to be totally fine just to carry you through the early game, your mid to yellow maps, and then Jack the Axe is going to push you into tier 16s with some upgrades on your gear. But honestly, I don't even need to go through all of this gear here. All we're looking for, you can just open the Path of Building yourself, but everything here is just life resistances, move speed on the boots, and then some intelligence on the rings and amulet itself there. So we can really see here that I am not buffing the numbers whatsoever or anything like that. We've got everything ticked that we need to. You know, maybe we could put the initial effect of Pride Aura down, but I put it on maximum. You know, I will buff the numbers a little bit there to hit the maximum effect. Absolute hacker right there. We're on a Shaper Guardian, ignited and chilled. I don't need to be ticked there because we're not actually igniting or chilled. I'm not sure why they're ticked, but they didn't actually apply anything. They're bleeding, they're maimed, and that is about it. There's not really anything. And we've got Frenzy Charges for Blood Rage. If you want to see the single target without the Frenzy Charges, you can untick that one, but I've ticked it there, right there. So that's pretty much it for the budget itself. It's extremely cheap to get going. I will talk about at the end of the video about how to actually level this build itself, because I would suggest not actually leveling with Bladestorm itself. I'm going to be suggesting something else. but you can switch to Bladestorm kind of midway through the story or to the end of the story, and you're going to be doing tons of damage with bleed, just as long as you've got enough bleed chance. But that's pretty much it. Flasks themselves, are going to be an Eternal Life Flask of Staunching, going to be very nice. A Lion's Roar is going to be kind of best in slot for your damage. However, some people don't like using Lion's Roar because of the knockback. And on Bladestorm itself, it can be a little bit annoying for the knockback. So it's up to you whether you choose it or not for some extra damage or no knockback. Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline, very kind of normal right there. Basalt Flask of Heat is pretty good. And I've chucked in an Eternal Mana Flask of Warding. We're going to be suffering a little bit on the mana cost until you get your crafts to your non-channeling skills on your rings and amulet. So an Eternal Mana Flask of Warding there to kind of remove curses and be immune to curses while you're using it is going to be extremely strong on this build as well. Jewels themselves, you're just looking at life, damage over time, multi, and maybe some other damage over time right there. That is pretty much it for the budget gear. Now let's talk about the links themselves. So the Bladestorm itself is just looking fairly standard. Now I'm not actually going to be using any of the new supports because I'm not sure exactly if they're going to be working well with Bladestorm. So we're just going for a very standard Bladestorm with deadly elements, brutality, melee physical damage, swift affliction, and chance to bleed on there as well. And if you don't have a 6-link, you're probably just going to be taking out something like Swift Affliction. It's probably going to be the best to take out right there. Now, we do have a temporary Corrupting Fever in here with just like a Portal and a Blood Rage, but I've also linked Brutality because the new change to Brutality is most likely going to be affecting Corrupting Fever. For those of you who don't remember what Corrupting Fever is, it's basically a skill that you can activate to consume some of your life, and then apply Corrupted Blood to enemies, which is going to scale with all of our Fizz damage over time multi. It's going to scale really nice and could even scale well with Brutality. And there's potentially a lot of other supports that do scale the dot damage from the Corrupting Fever as well. So it's going to be a lot of playing around at League Start to figure out how much more damage this is going to give against bosses right here, which is pretty cool. Then we go into kind of our aura setup. We've got our Flesh and Stone, our Maim, our War Banner, and Pride. Now, Flesh and Stone is going from 25 to 35% mana reserved. We can see here our unreserved mana is 12%, which is actually, that's a little bit too low. So I'd have to actually, you probably just wouldn't be using War Banner. I'm not sure actually why that one is in right there. So you can take the War Banner out and you're still totally fine. But that is also going to be supplemented really nicely with the Versatile Stance. Or the other thing that you could use, or could not use, is instead take out Maim and still use War Banner, but have a little play around there. What fits the best for your reservation and everything like that there as well. So tick or untick what you feel you need to. There's a cast when damage taken set up with Vile Molten Shell, just with increased duration. I like to keep it at level 20 because you're going to be taking a lot of damage and then that's going to be proccing nicely, but you can play around with maybe even, you know, taking your cast when damage taken down and also taking your Vile Molten Shell level down as well. Just make sure, I always like to say this, but cast when damage taken only procs the skill if it is of equal requiring level or lower. So say if we're on a level 12 cast when damage taken, which requires level 60, you do want your active skill to be, let's say, that's level 58. If I go up, that's going to go to level 61, so that will no longer proc. So it'll have to be level 16 or lower. So let's just bump those back up to level 20 right there as well. Okay, and let's pop that right back up. Then we've got our movement. I like to do Leap Slam with Fortify and faster attacks and Culling Strike on the ends there. And lastly, I've just got a self-cast vulnerability because we'll just be self-casting this on bosses ourselves until we do get a curse on hit. So we can pretty much socket this anywhere that we do need to or where we can in our build. And that is pretty much the setup, guys. It's really simple. It's going to carry you, especially with the Bleed Explosions from Gladiator. We're going to get to the path of building skill tree very soon, but before that we're going to talk about the end game setup of gear and links. All right, let's jump to that right now. Now, you're all wondering how to scale this build. Now, 1 million bleed DPS is okay for the start of the game, but I think 8.2 million DPS is a little bit nicer for the end game, especially on a build as tanky as this one right here. So, let's talk about the gear that you're going to be using. Now, yes, the bleed modifier on Elder Axes or Elder Weapons in general, and the poison modifier has been completely removed, but it has been basically a new kind of damage over time multiplier has been added to Elder Axes in replacement. Now, I am showcasing some pretty high-end gear here, and I'm going to be talking about everything that is most worth it, but you are mainly going to be focusing all of your gear around Elder modifiers themselves. The reason being is Blasphemer's Grasp Assassin Mitts is so extremely nice with Elder items equipped. You do get damage over time multi per Elder item equipped, plus maximum life, and you can also pretty easily corrupt them for vulnerability on hit, which is going to be really nice. Now, if all of your equipped items are Elder items, you do also remove an ailment every time you use a flask, which is pretty nice as well. So you'll see the theme through all of the items here will be focused around Elder mods themselves. Now, the axe itself is a very good modifier, a very good axe that we have right here. It's kind of the top end of what you'll be seeing, but it still has, because I pretty much just deleted the modifier with the 60% more chance for bleeds to deal 100% more damage modifier on here. I just completely removed that one. But it is still quite nice here, so you can still get a better axe with some more bleed multi on here, but it's going to be very difficult to get. So this one is going to be quite nice for you. Now, if you still want to be using Jack the Axe in the endgame, you're still going to be hitting just under 6 million bleed DPS, which is super tasty, once again, with all the defenses we have. And your recovery, your regen, on the Jack the Axe, as you can see, is way more. So Jack the Axe is actually a much more survivable option and cheaper option, because your regen is just that much more, especially while you're clearing. Against bosses, it's not going to be as much, because we can actually take the nearby enemies down to 1, but you're still going to get about 400 more regen right there. But we can go up to 4 there with the Jack the Axe, which is super nice. All right. Yeah, Jack the Axe is basically just crazy. It's really, really, really good. Now, the shield itself, once again, as I said, I'm showcasing some pretty nice options right here. And another option that you could use in place of this shield is actually going to be a surrender shield. But this shield right here is kind of the end game, what you're aiming for. So getting really high life, you're getting some regen. You're also getting physical damage reduction and increased damage per 1% chance to block attack damage. It's going to be super nice for you as well. You could supplement one of those for a percent life gained on block. Is going to be very nice for the build, because you are capped spell and life block, which is very nice. But you're looking for a shield like this one here. The helmet itself, just looking for good life, maybe some chaos res. Reduced mana reserved is pretty nice to kind of help with your mana. It's not needed, but it is nice. And getting enchantment of +1 max number of Bladestorms is going to really help you there as well. And lastly, with the effect of nearby enemies taking increased physical damage is going to really help you as well. Once again, Elder item. Astral Plate itself, you're looking for socketed attacks having negative 20 to total mana cost, or any sort of negative to mana cost. Now this right here, again, another very, very good Astral Plate. This is something to strive towards, but it's the top end of the top end right here of something that's going to be really nice. And then we've got even a crafted blocking attack damage on there as well. Moving on to, we already talked about Blasphemer's Grasp right here. But Titan Greaves is just looking like move speed and inflicting damage and some big life. Once again, these are the top end of the top end. So with the new harvest, some of these are going to be very difficult to obtain, but the reason I'm keeping them so powerful here is not to buff up the numbers. It's to basically give you something to aim for, all right? So before you angry comment below, oh, I might not be able to achieve this, this is your aiming, what you're aiming for on your build and everything like that here as well. So once again, Amulet with Fizz damage over time, Fizz damage to attacks, damage per strength is, yeah, not needed. And the Warcry's craft there is actually not needed there as well, but these are all really, really nice. Steel Rings, once again, good damage to attacks. They've got some intelligence on them and some high life. And they've got the crafts on them there as well. They're both quite nice right there. And the Stygian Vise with some life, increased max life, and Fire Cold Lightning res. And the global fizz damage is just a little bit of a flex on the top there as well. That's pretty much it. Now for Cluster Jewel itself, I actually am going to talk about the Cluster Jewel right now, and we will go over it once again in the passive skill tree section. But you're just looking for an increased physical damage large. Is what I would like to do the most, because you can get Master the Fundamentals. Actually, those nodes aren't even supposed to be spec'd into. Master the Fundamentals is really nice just for Reduced elemental damage, increased physical damage, and evasion rating and armor and physical damage here. And then you're just going into some damage over time, physical damage over time multis with wasting, affliction, and wound aggravation right here. These are going to be really, really nice nodes. And then the jewels themselves, you're just looking for some max life, bleeding, fizz damage over time, global fizz damage. These can honestly be done pretty well just by rolling physical damage on the harvest modifiers themselves on jewels. You're going to be able to hit some pretty nice ones right there. So that's what to aim for. Let me know how close you get with this build. The flasks themselves stay very, very, very similar, but that's the gear itself. Okay, now let's move on to the skills. Almost everything is the same, honestly, from the budget setup to the endgame setup. I have decided to use Fortify, and you can choose this in the budget setup as well instead of Chance to Bleed. Fortify is very, very nice. If we do something like Chance to Bleed, Chance to Bleed is giving you a little bit more damage, but Fortify is obviously going to keep more uptime rather than relying on Leap Slam for your Fortify. The setup right here is going to give you permanent Fortify uptime, especially with those Blade Storms running around. And then pretty much everything else, once again, Corrupting Fever, we've got Flesh and Stone and War Banner and Pride linked with Enlighten, meaning that you can actually keep your Flesh and Stone up now, which is really nice. And then you do have the vulnerability on the gloves, and Thirst for Blood if you're using Jack the Axe, which does reserve 10% of your life. 10% is a very mitigatable amount right there, especially with the life regen that you're getting, and the cheapness of the axe itself. That's pretty much everything for the budget and endgame setup. We're going to talk about the passive skill tree section now, so let's jump to that. Let's go. Time to talk about the passive skill tree. So I'm going to be going over the differences between the budget version of the tree, which is basically no cluster version, and then the cluster version. But the leveling skill trees themselves are just down here. So like all of my build guides, they do have 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100 points, and then the end game are right here as well. Of the budget and the endgame version. Alright, so first of all, it's fairly simple of a layout here, but we are going to talk about the classic Gladiator Ascendancy first, alright? So we've got Blood in the Eyes and Gratuitous Violence. These are just the two staples right here, with the staple block right here in our Painforged and Versatile Combatant. This gives us capped block and spell dodge, so not spell dodge, spell block, with a lot of damage coming through all of our bleeds, bleed explosions, and more damage with bleeding as well, or more damage with physical damage over time is how this is being changed, which is going to affect our Corrupting Fever now, which is super nice. But yeah, the skill tree itself is basically coming out of here. Now, a lot of people would say take the physical attack damage, but with Bladestorm and stacking up with Crimson Dance, I do like these attack damage, attack speed nodes right here. We do get our armor, evasion, and life. We come out, we hit our shield nodes, we come down through, we pick up dirty techniques and Tessudo and retaliation for more attack speed. And I do like on the budget version as well to hit versatile stance, because this is also getting some more reservation, which is super nice. We then come and we hit our bloodletting into Crimson Dance, which is super nice for the stacking of the Bladestorm itself. Soul of Steel coming down into Bannerman, hitting up Call to Arms if you do decide to use some sort of Warcry, but you don't need this. This is very much a personal preference if you choose to use Enduring Cry or something like that as well. We've then got Splitting Strikes, because we are going to be using axes in this build. We're talking about Aggressive Bastion for some shield nodes, up into some more shield nodes with Solidity, grabbing some life, jumping up through here. These two axe nodes right here and the whole circle itself. Some duel right here, and then coming up through Barbarism into Resolute Technique. That's basically the end of the budget version itself. If we're talking about the endgame cluster version, we are foregoing some life here, but we are getting life through a bunch more clusters themselves right through here, and some other places. So not much has really changed. We're kind of just foregoing a little bit here, and a little bit here as well, to get some more stuff through all of this. So as I said, we're talking about Battle Hardened and Master the Fundamentals of a physical damage cluster duel. Then talking into fizz damage over time multi-cluster duels in the medium with wasting affliction and wound aggravation. And they gems themselves in the sockets all through here. And then hitting up devotion and another dual socket to end up right here, which is super nice. So that's the end game version. Very simple. If you want to go for more damage, you can kind of unspec even more life if you'd like to, or you can even unspec something like the Soul of Steel, and we could put a whole new cluster in here if you'd like to, but you know what, I'm going to stick with the more defense, because that's a little bit better way to go about it. That's pretty much all I have to say about the passive tree itself, we're going to finish this build guide off with a little bit of leveling advice. As I said, I would prefer to level with a different skill and then transition into this once we do get our Gladiator nodes. Around about Cruel Lab, we'll transition into Bladestorm Bleed. That is about it. Let's move on. So just to finish off this build guide, I'm just going to quickly talk about the leveling and the build as a whole. Now, if you're at this point, then you probably have watched through the video, and the people who will be clicking off and writing comments about what I'm about to talk about don't usually watch this far into a video anyway, but obviously this doesn't have Omega Lull DPS, and that is for a reason. It is a Gladiator build, it is hardcore viable, and it is very tanky. Now, I could juice out double, triple the damage if I wanted to and go full DPS, but, you know, defenses are also very nice on a build like this. And we're still getting some pretty nice DPS at the end of it. And once again, the endgame gear is extremely strong, so you're not going to be expecting to get that without hundreds of exalts, but it is something to move towards. And prioritizing just getting the Elder mods on certain pieces of gear and getting a high life and capping your block is all you really need to do, and making sure those resistances are all up. Alright, leveling itself. I'm only going to talk a little bit about this because I am using a different leveling setup than the Bladestorm itself, which is going to be a very, very standard leveling setup for a duelist, which is steel skills. So mainly looking for splitting steel in Act 1 with a 3-link of a green, green, red with Onslaught and Chance to Bleed. This is going to carry you until you do get to level 12 Mervale Shattering Steel. You're just going to replace that in and use Onslaught and Chance to Bleed. Now make sure with steel skills, you do keep your Call of Steel shards up, your steel shards up. So basically using Call of Steel every now and then. You're going to notice a really big drop off in damage if you don't have those steel shards up, so just make sure you keep clicking that button, setting it to something you're going to click a lot of. Now you're going to be looking for Dash, Ancestral Protector, War Banner, Steel Skin once you do the Breaking Some Eggs, and you can try Blood and Sand as well, see if that works for you. And then with Brutus, you're going to be picking up your move skill, which is Leap Slam, and then you can decide to use Vitality if you want, or Enduring Cry, or both. It'd be really nice using both in hardcore. Mervale at level 12, as I said, Shattering Steel is going to be super nice as well. Picking up Onslaught, Chance to Bleed. And then in Act 2, you're picking up your faster attacks for Leap Slam, picking up Blood Rage, picking up Herald of Purity to give you a little bit more damage. And then Act 3 is where you're going to be picking up your Bladestorm to start leveling it up. I wouldn't try using it now. You can if you want to, but I wouldn't recommend it until you get Cruel Lab or until you get a lot of bleed chance. You can try it at Normal Lab as well if you'd like to at the end of Act 4. At Act 4, you are also picking up Brutality, and you're going to just go back and pick up any gems listed for your main skill now just to start leveling them. And you can also try using Corrupting Fever here and see what the damage is like, whether you want to be using that in the endgame or not, but I think it's going to be really good for the endgame. Around Act 6 or 7 is where I personally would transition to Bladestorm, but play it by ear yourself. If it doesn't feel great, if you want to keep using the Shattering Steel or any sort of like leveling weapon with that, then you can keep doing that. But once your bleed chance is pretty high with Bladestorm, you do want to be switching to that, using Blood Stance for single target and Sand Stance for clearing. At this same time, you do want to spec into Crimson Dance when you do go into Bladestorm. So if you're specking in, if you're chucking on Bladestorm and you're like, oh, my damage isn't very high, it's probably because you're not in Crimson Dance and you're not stacking up those bleeds as much as you can. For a leveling bleed axe, you do want to be using, look, any sort of crafted axe. Each axe, you might want to be doing the craft of either a magic or rare rustic sash, a whetstone, and a weapon itself. You vendor that, and then that's going to give you a really nice leveling weapon, or you can even use Relentless Fury as a one-handed. If you're lacking a little bit of damage, try two-handers for a while until you get maybe a nice shield, and you do get some block nodes and everything like that as well. A two-hander is really going to carry you through. The only thing I would say for that is if you're going to be planning on doing two-handers to start off with, go through these nodes instead of these nodes here for the shields, just to give you some more base damage to begin with. But I do like these nodes right here myself. That's pretty much all I have to say for leveling. Act 6, Act 7, Act 8, Bladestorm's going to start to really pick up and you're going to start to do a lot of damage. But if you do have any other questions, come and ask me on stream. That's everything I have to say today about the build. I hope you enjoy it. let me know if you've decided to play this one. And if you do have any questions, if you're struggling with the build, once again, come and ask me on stream or leave a comment below and we can see if we can help you out right there. Thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, Badger is out.